Welcome to Dr. M Health Corner Talk Show. Welcome. It's Dr. Unati here, your health talk show host. It is 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Today, it's an exciting day because I brought a wonderful person to me who's going to educate us on stuff that really matter to us. Today, I am here today to introduce to you Dr. Catherine Toomer. He is a colleague out in the States. She is basically a community health and family medicine specialist. She basically right now focuses on weight loss programs. She's a specialist in weight loss program. And today we're going to talk about actually a journey she took herself personally on weight loss. And of course, the narratives we have around weight loss. And actually, before we start introducing Dr. Catherine, I just want us to remember this. World Health Organization gives us stats every year. Do you know, up till now, 2021, we have 1 billion people who are overweight out in the world. And amongst them, there's 300 million people living with obesity. And the sad part is now we're starting to see children with obesity. Dr. Toomer is going to actually touch on that. Welcome into this show, Dr. Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to see you. And of course, I'm glad to discuss this topic with you. It couldn't be anyone other than you. Dr. Catherine, do you want to take us through your journey? You lost your own weight. You were pregnant with your first child and you lost 60 pounds. You struggled with your own struggles. Do you want to take us through that journey?
Okay. Well, like many people, as we get older, I started medical school and I started stress eating. From the stress of medical school, then I got married. I started eating like my husband because, they eat many differently than we do. And so I started eating along his schedule. And then I started residency and stress eating again. And then I had my first daughter, my third year of residency, and gained a significant amount of weight during that pregnancy. And then 2.5 years later, I was pregnant with my second daughter and gained another significant amount of weight. And by the time she was born, I was morbidly obese. I was an insulin-dependent diabetic. And then a month after she was born, I was diagnosed with postpartum cardiomyopathy, which is, for those outside of medicine, that is heart failure related to pregnancy. And so at that point, my heart was only functioning at about 15% of what it should have been. And I was scared. I was very scared.
Of course.
I was very overwhelmed. And I tried to get help. When trying to get help, everyone focused on my heart. And so it was follow what your cardiologists say. My cardiologist just said, try to do as best as you can. But I was a doctor myself. So I said, okay, part of my struggle was my weight and my diabetes was not in control. And so I sought out help to get my diabetes under control and to lose weight. And I was told I was too high risk. No one wanted to touch me. All the things that people normally do to help, people lose weight, they just couldn't do it with me. And the other thing I realized in my journey and trying to find someone to help me, that most of the people I was seeking out to help me lose weight, I couldn't find anyone who had actually lost weight themselves. Most of the people were
saying that
naturally thin people who had never actually lost weight. And so they understood their algorithms and their process, but not all of it, not the psychological and the social aspect, and except for what they had learned, not from what they knew from their own experience. And so what I did is I just created my own program. I decided to get my diabetes under control, and I created what is now considered a ketogenic diet. This was 20 years ago, so this was unheard of. Nobody was talking about ketogenic diets then.
Yes.
And so I created a high protein, low carbohydrate diet for me to get my diabetes under control. And I knew that once I did that, my weight would come off. Now we know very clearly that carbohydrates are tied to weight loss and to weight gain. But at that time, we didn't know this.
Right.
It was still pretty much about, lowering your calories, increasing your activity. Well, I couldn't lower my calories too much because I had an illness I was still trying to get through, and I couldn't be active because I was in heart failure. So I couldn't exercise.
You could not do it.
I couldn't exercise. So it had to be through diet only. And so I focused on my diabetes and my weight came off and I lost about 60 pounds in 6 months. And then I slowly got better and I've kept that weight off now for 20 years. But recently, what I find now that I'm 55, I went through menopause, and in keeping the weight off during menopause, and by staying healthy in later in life, I found that I had to become a little more strict with certain things. And by doing that, I actually lost another 15. So I have a total of 75 pounds, mostly through dietary changes and nothing strict. Anyone can tell you I have no willpower when it comes to food. I still like to eat what I like to eat.
Right.
So what I did
Yes.
is I learned how to, and I taught myself and created a program for myself where I could eat whatever I wanted, but it was just how I did it so
Yes.
that it didn't cause me a problem. And then, but what happened, I was out of practice for some time because of my health. And when I got better, I went back into practice and tried to recreate what I did for myself with my patients. I worked with the underserved. Which had um, a very large obese population, percentage of obesity in our population. And so I said, this is perfect. I can help people reverse their diabetes. I can help them get their hypertension under control. I can make sure that, they don't have any other issues. And I found that I couldn't do it because a time allotted to see patients was so narrow that I couldn't really dive into what I needed to. And so I ended up creating um, my own center, health,
Of
wellness, and weight
course.
loss center, so that I could do it in the way that I like. So I see people sometimes for an hour at a time. I do virtually, so anywhere in the world. And so I just try to recreate what is and how I train the biopsychosocial approach I help people lose weight. It's health, wellness, weight loss in that order.
I love that. It's a journey. And you know
Hmm.
what, Dr. Catherine, there's something that you said, the
Hmm.
biopsychosocial actually approach has changed the way we look at obesity. And
Yes.
I think also even the Obesity Society is teaching even us healthcare providers to change the language around weight gain or maybe obesity. Because for the
Hmm.
longest time, even in my training, it was easy for doctors, for nurses to carelessly say you are fat,
Mm.
and stop eating. And, there's that bias that we believe that people that are overweight or who have obesity, they automatically eating a lot. And a
Mm-mm.
lot of
But that's
times
not
it's
true.
not the case. It's not true.
Exactly.
And they keep coming back saying, actually, doctor, I actually eat little. How do we
Hmm.
explain this? Can you actually take through people here, Dr. Kathleen, and show how also stress contributes? I mean, we talk about these
Hmm.
hormones, cortisol and all, because a lot of
Hmm.
times people judge people by just looking at their image and thinking that you're eating a lot. Because reality is there's so much involved in weight gain.
There is, and truly, what happens is once your body reaches a certain percentage of fat, it really takes very little energy to maintain that fat, and so you often don't have to eat very many calories just to keep the weight. And so often when people say, what you hear a lot of doctors saying, you need to lose some weight, but they never say how.
They
They don't
never
tell
say
you
how.
how to do it. And
Right.
then, or they're saying, well, you're eating too much, stop eating. But of course, if someone starts eating less, their body goes into starvation mode, which is a stress mode for your body.
Wow.
And what I say is, our bodies are designed to make sure we stay alive. And our body, two things our body focuses on to make sure that we'll do that, because we are animals, we are part of the food chain. So there's
Mm-hmm.
two things. One, starvation. Our body is very sensitive to if we are starving, and we'll stop it and we'll remember it and stop it from happening again. which is why yo-yo dieting is a problem. The second is to prevent us from being eaten by other animals. And that's where the stress hormones come in. That's where strenuous exercise can sometimes be counterproductive. Our body can't tell when we're running on a treadmill if we're running because we're being chased or we're running for exercise.
Wow.
As far our brain sees it as the same. And
Wonderful.
so, and that's why often when you see people who start working out really heavily right at the beginning of their process, their weight sometimes goes up or it
Mhm.
won't budge because their body goes into stress mode. And so there's lots of, the reason stress is such a problem. When we're under a lot of stress, our body thinks we're diabetic. It behaves like we're diabetic. That's the easiest way of explaining it. It produces a hormone, cortisol, which I think many of us know, that works in a way so that it makes our body very efficient at making fat, especially around our middle and around our face.
Yes.
Um, and so it creates all sorts of issues, and I won't get into the biochemistry of it all, but
That's okay.
what it does is it just tricks your body into thinking you're diabetic. So every single carbohydrate you eat becomes, your body immediately tries to make fat out of it. And
Yes.
so one of the things there's different things that can create stress.
Hmm.
One, exercising too heavily, not getting enough sleep, your social interactions with people around you, work and family, um, the rushing, not giving yourself enough time to do things. When you rush to do something, if you procrastinate, if you're disorganized, that produces stress hormones in your body.
It
And so those
does.
are things that you can alter so that when people like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, well, if you're also not getting enough sleep and you're rushing every time you go to work and you're always trying to beat the clock, those things will contribute to holding on to weight. Um, the other that also is feeling guilty about what you eat.
Yes.
Food is to be enjoyed.
Hmm.
How you approach your food will determine what happens to it once it enters your body. If you go at food and you think, I shouldn't be eating this is bad, your stress hormones shoot up. What you're eating then becomes fat. If you sit and you relax
And
and you
enjoy
enjoy
the
it,
moment.
and
Yes.
so it does the opposite. It feeds the other hormones with the dopamine and the serotonins that help you
Of course.
relax. So what
Yes.
happens? So when you eat that food, it completely changes what happens to it once it enters the body, simply because of hormonal changes. And
Right.
so, of course, there's limits to all of that. Everything's within moderation, but um, but yes, stress management
Stress
is really
management.
important, and
Yes.
one of the best and underutilized stress um, mechanisms is exercise.
Yes.
Low impact,
Hmm.
sustained exercise most days of the week. Walking, yoga, Pilates, dancing,
Yes.
um, even singing, because singing is meditative breathing. You take nice deep breaths in and you slowly let it out. If you don't want to meditate, sing. It does the same thing.
That's beautiful. You know what? You mentioned something about also the mindset in this.
Mhm.
Now, even in practice, we're starting to see that gut mind mechanism. There's that
Mhm.
cycle now we're focusing on. You know what,
Yes.
Dr. Catherine, do you want to take a deep dive on what being obese does, like holistically, mentally,
Mhm.
down to our
Yeah.
systems? Because a lot of times when people present with erectile dysfunction, like for instance in men, or
Mhm.
low testosterone, people don't necessarily understand it could be related to obesity. Do you want to take
Often
us
it
through
is.
that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Well, so there's, like I said, there's a biopsychosocial. So the biology of obesity or having extra fat cells is that fat cells are storage cells. Yes, they store fat for energy when we need it, but they also store hormones and they also store other chemicals that disrupt how our body functions. One
Yes.
of the hormones that fat cells hold on to is estrogen.
Hmm.
So for women who have, which is why we can have a little extra padding, and we need that padding, in fact, to have children, is okay. But in men, it counters testosterone. And so
Yes.
what it does is it affects libido. It affects Which again, and erectile causes erectile dysfunction. It can cause
Yes.
mood changes.
Mood changes.
Mood,
Yes.
yes. And so, because it just takes testosterone is used in men and actually a little bit in women as well, because we have ours
Mhm.
as well. It sort of helps regulate who we are as people. It just sort of keeps our brain functioning like it's supposed to, our body in regulation. So when that gets disrupted by fat cells and what fat cells give off, all of it gets
Yes.
disrupted. The other
Yes.
biological thing that happens is fat cells put out chemicals which cause inflammation.
Mhm.
And inflammation is, I think everyone pretty much knows how bad inflammation is. I mean, our body uses inflammation as a way of trying to protect itself, but in protecting itself, it actually creates the problem it's trying to avoid. And
Right.
so when you have your knees get inflamed, you get arthritis, you get pain.
Yes.
When
Yes.
it's blood vessels in our heart,
Mm,
it creates these nice sticky surfaces for
mm,
cholesterol to stick, and then you end up with a heart attack. If it's in your brain, it's a stroke. If it's your kidneys,
yes.
it's kidney failure leading to dialysis. If it's in your fingers and toes, depending on what else is going on, you actually end up with amputations.
Mhm.
Blindness is another,
Yes.
dementia. And so,
Mm,
you know, it's good. It's very important um, to not obsess to the point where um, you do anything drastic or strenuous to try and lose fat. But it's very important to understand what actually fat does in the body. The
right.
psychological component of being overweight or being obese is that it does affect moods. Even if your body positivity and being very accepting helps, but it does not counter the chemicals that the fat cells put out. So you're still going to be affected to a certain degree.
Of
So
course.
whatever you're feeling, even if you feel good, you'll feel even better if your body's in balance. And
Right.
so, and the psychological component of that also is if you like the way you look, that's great. But if you don't, seeing that image and constantly telling yourself there's something wrong with you and you don't like it, that starts this vicious cycle. And our mind, our body cannot tell the difference between bullying if it's coming from us or it's coming from someone else. The
Yes.
trauma is
Talk
the
of
same.
that.
The trauma
Yes.
is the same.
Trauma is the same.
So
And you know
what you
what?
say to yourself matters.
Yeah, yes. And we see this a lot. How many
Mhm.
times we also share it with our friends or our families or probably our
Mhm.
clients who would say things even in front of their kids when they're coming to see us. Oh, I'm fat. They say all these
Mhm.
things. And now you start having it actually spills over to a young daughter who's 10 who
Mhm.
starts obsessing about weight. We do see
Yes.
that in practice. And you know
Mhm.
what? Let's talk about kids because right now we're starting to see in practice young people that in the past diabetes was affecting type 1 was for younger
Mhm.
people. Now we're starting
Mhm.
to see young people, 17-year-olds. I have 18-year-olds that have type 2 diabetes because of obesity.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's the social. That's the social of the biopsychosocial.
Yes,
Children don't
yes,
buy their own food.
they
Children don't go
don't.
grocery shopping. They rarely do the cooking. So it's a family issue. It's not a child issue. And
Right,
so that's the social where social things come in. Who's around the person, who's providing the nourishment, why are they providing it in the way they are? Is it because of financial restrictions? Is it because
wow.
they live in a food desert and they can't get to
Mhm.
fresh groceries? Is it because um, they never learned how to eat properly and so they
Right,
don't know how to feed their children properly?
right.
um, is it because, especially in older teenagers, it's because they've started driving and now
Mm,
they have access to fast food that they didn't before, or they go out with their friends, and a lot of teenagers have very high metabolisms, not all do, and they eat like their friends do. And
right.
so um, or they're not as active. It used to be athletics was very common. We were very active either through farming or through other activities, and but our eating habits didn't really change when our activity levels did.
That's true.
And yeah, and so, but what that does is that it shortens their lives.
Yeah.
Um, their
Unfortunately.
life expectancy drops.
Right.
Their
Right.
social, their self-esteem drops. You see
Mm-hmm.
higher rates of depression. You
Mm-hmm.
see, which again affects how your body reacts to food, how you react to food, your self-esteem, um, motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation and depression go hand in hand, and so it just starts this vicious cycle
It
of.
does.
And then, of course, with any carbohydrate sensitivity, either from sensitivity all the way to diabetes, you eat a carbohydrate, you start craving them, and then you eat more, and then you crave them more, and you eat more. It starts a really vicious cycle because our brain loves the breakdown of carbohydrates to glucose, and our brain loves glucose, and that's why sugar
It
addiction is so
does.
common.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know what? Actually, I always, when I talk to my patients whom I'm
yeah,
trying to educate and convince about smoking cessation, I actually bring about the sugar addiction. How many
hmm,
people who are sugar addicted
yeah,
judge people who smoke? Think about
yeah,
it, right?
hmm,
We tend to think that that is a better off addiction. And of course, you
hmm,
touch something on the relationship with food. Just last week, one of my friends on Facebook posted something,
hmm,
Dr. Catherine, about how you get forced by your parents to eat. Let's talk about that component because even
hmm,
in childhood, the relationship you have with food, were you
hmm,
starved or were you overfed? What relationship do
hmm,
you have in childhood? Because it
yeah.
affects us in adulthood,
Yes, it does. It does.
right?
There's a lot of things that actually affect us in adulthood and what happens. We socialize around food. That starts
Right?
as childhood, which isn't a problem as long as you have ways of making sure that you can do that in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
But the other is what issues we have with our body, with our food, with whatever it is we're doing. It's very important we do not transfer those to our children
Right.
because children will eat when they are hungry and they will eat what you give them. Eventually, if they're hungry enough, they'll eat whatever's available. So, one of the things that often happens is parents, we get worried that our child's not eating, so we just give them whatever it is we know they'll eat just to get some nutrition in them.
Mm.
But then what ends up happening, they start selecting out the things that they only things they want. So then you end up with a child who's only eating French fries.
Mm.
Won't eat any, or only eating,
We see
fish
this.
fish sticks.
Yes. Yes.
But children will eat what we eat. So if you want your children to eat vegetables, you have to eat vegetables. If you
Right.
want your children to eat a balanced meal, then you have to eat a balanced meal, and you don't allow anything else. But
Mm-hmm.
you don't force it. You leave it there, and they eat it when they're ready,
I love
and
it. I
that's all you
love
can
that.
do.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
talk of our body stature, like, I mean, each, I see different races or different basically body genetics. Let's rather use
Hmm.
that. I know
Hmm.
that now we're even conscious of not using the BMI. We're so
Yeah.
obsessed with body mass index.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that, Dr. Catherine? Because the
Yeah.
medical community,
Okay.
we are so obsessed with it. I'm glad now we're starting to
Okay.
loosen up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and understand people's body image and
Hmm.
stature and their makeup.
Yes. Well, I don't think that anyone needs to for me to tell them about the disparities in outcomes in healthcare or the disparities in medical delivery and some of the biases that come into that. We all have biases, but
Right.
there are also biases that affect us racially. The other thing that I think is often overlooked is that our genetics in general, now this isn't of course all across the board for everybody, we tend to be more muscular.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the United States, it was actually intentionally done. Breeding of slaves was intentional, and it was intentionally done between women who had large hips and men who were very muscular because they thought that they could make more money off of the children they had. And so that has affected how we are built. We are
Mm-hmm.
muscular and we tend to carry our weight around our hips and thighs.
Mm-hmm. We do.
And of course, now that's considered the ideal figure. So what, but it wasn't for a long time. And
Such a
so often
blessing
what
in
happened,
disguise now,
yeah,
right?
and So what happened is that when we stood on a scale going based on scale charts that were not designed for us, we were always overweight. It was never, our
Mhm.
musculature was never taken into consideration. And so what that also did was give us body image issues. And
Mm.
so on top, so the biology was wrong, the
Mhm.
psychology was damaging, and the only place where we really didn't have much of an issue was the sociology. In our communities, having a little extra weight is still considered attractive, and that's probably one of the only places where it did not affect us adversely.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah. In fact, when I was growing up, skinniness was not what you wanted to be. You wanted
Mhm.
to, yeah, you wanted to have some quote unquote meat on your bones, and
Right.
so, yeah, and so, and that's changing, of course, a little bit as Western, different things start playing and coming into play, but using BMI charts to determine health is inappropriate. It
Yes.
really body composition matters.
That's it.
It really matters, and so, but on the same token, though, no matter what your BMI is, if you're not active and you're not
Mhm.
eating properly, it doesn't matter what that number is. So you
Right.
need to still eat properly. You still need to move most days of the week so that your body, if you're not in an active job, like, most of us are not, we're sedentary.
We're
And so,
sedentary. We always
yeah,
sitting. Yes.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So we
Yeah.
have to add that into our day because no matter what else is going on, unless that's happening, unless we're keeping our heart healthy and keeping our muscles toned, nothing else, no other number will matter. Even
Of
even a weight
course.
on a scale. There are a lot of very unhealthy thin people
Very
walking
much
around.
so, with very high cholesterol because they're eating
Hmm.
anyhow. I'm glad you mentioned that. Dr. Catherine,
Yeah.
we are going through a pandemic, and
Yes.
the reality is the people that I've seen are
Hmm.
struggling with complications of COVID 19. Weight
Hmm.
plays a big role.
Yes.
Even those that passed away, actually, I saw the
Hmm.
connection, and I mean, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure you did too. Do you want
Hmm.
to comment on that? Because people are saying,
Yeah.
why would you think of weight if you're thinking COVID?
Well, because COVID kills by inflammation, and when you have a lot of fat cells, your inflammatory markers, as they say in the blood, are often very high. So
Mhm.
when you have one inflammatory process added to already a baseline inflammatory process, you really have no defense, none whatsoever. And that's why a lot of the issues that cause inflammation, like high blood sugar, also is another inflammatory process or that
Mhm.
causes inflammation. All those things combined, hypertension, um, it doesn't cause inflammation. However, it does cause problems with blood vessels. And inflammation actually most adversely affects our blood vessels because every part of our body needs blood. And so as soon as our blood vessels are affected, every organ in our body is affected. And our organs are interconnected. So if one goes, the others start being affected as well. And so,
Absolutely.
and so, um, but again, it's not so much about weight and BMI, it's about lifestyle and habits. You can have two people eating exactly the same way, exercising in exactly the same way, and they may have two totally different weights, two totally different BMIs, and they're both equally as healthy. And so it's really important for us to sort of get away from a number. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's important that we don't carry around extra fat cells that we really don't need. However, it's not really about a number. And although we really have no other way of saying it other than weight loss, we call it weight loss, but really it's more fat loss. That's
Fat
really what's
loss.
most important.
Yes, yes. I love that. I really do.
Hmm.
And you know what, Dr. Catherine, I want us to talk
Hmm.
about how, in general, like in terms of the managing weight loss, we talk about all
Hmm.
these yo-yo diets. People come in
Hmm.
and they come and tell us about, Doc, I saw this product. What do you think of it? I'm sure you see
Hmm.
this all the time in your
Yeah.
practice. And, they are temporal. So what is the best way? Like, I mean, you shared your own
Hmm.
story in your 19 years, 20 years of this. What's the
Hmm.
best way to lose weight?
Lose weight in a way now that you can do 30 years from now.
Love it.
That's my philosophy. If you can't do it when you're 90, then you should not be doing it now. If you are doing it now, then you need to come up with some way to pivot later, because somewhere along the lines, you're not going to be able to maintain it.
Right.
The way I keep my weight off now is exactly the same way I lost it 20 years ago. I eat in the same way. I exercise in the same way. I live life in the same way. And my mother, actually, who's 91 years old, eats. I can sit down with her and eat without having to change anything I do, because, again, what's healthy for me is healthy for her. And we can both do it. Nothing drastic. Now, it may not be quick.
Of course.
Unless you have some underlying medical condition that you're controlling. Now, when you get a medical condition under control, sometimes you will lose weight rather quickly. But if you don't have an underlying medical condition, you're just changing your lifestyle in a way so that you can stay healthy or get healthier and stay healthy. It may not be quick. 1 to 2 pounds a week on average. Weight loss is not linear. It's up and down, up and down, up and down, but so it's an average. So it's really important not to pay attention to the little blips of 1 or 2 pounds and then the drops of 4 pounds and the blips, because it's the average. So 4 to 8 pounds a month, 10 at the most. I always tell, if you're losing more than 10 pounds a month, pay attention. Now, you may be losing it in a way that's healthy, but pay attention just in case something happens and you can't do all the things that you're doing now to lose weight. And the other is that I tell people losing weight is sort of like, or getting healthy and being well and, shedding fat. You do it in the same way that people talk about income. You should have multiple streams of income. In case you lose one, you have others to back you up. Yes. It's the same with weight loss. Have multiple ways in which you are staying healthy, so that if something happens, if you are losing all your weight from running, if you injure your ankle and you can't run, then what happens? If you're not paying attention also to your eating and also to your mindset and how well how you're reacting to situations.
Right.
And so have lots of different ways. And so what I do is I exercise moderately, so it's not too much of a chore. And again, it's, I'm not doing nothing. I do something most days of the week. I walk while I watch Netflix, because I walk on a treadmill. It's too hot in South Carolina to walk.
I know.
And so I kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I watch Netflix, and then I do muscle toning a few days a week.
Right.
But I also watch my carbohydrates. I don't necessarily drop them. I'm not on a keto diet at all. I don't think ketogenic diets are sustainable. But what I will do is I'm more mindful in that if I'm about to eat something, I'll look at it. And if it's mostly carbohydrates, I'll remove some of the carbs and add some more protein.
Right.
And that's it.
Love
and
it.
That's all I do. And I drink lots of water. Now, the other is, and this is something that is often overlooked, water. Hydration is so overlooked. Dehydration makes you tired. Being thirsty can make you think you're hungry when you're not. It changes how you digest
said
food.
That on your website. Yes, you teach about that.
Also, because, and it's also when you drink water, when you break down food, you get the nutrients. Those nutrients are triggers to tell your body you've been fed. So again, it affects your hunger. And so it does fill you up. It does hydrate you, and it does just your moods are affected by hydration. When you're dehydrated, you actually can't. You suffer from a mild depression.
Right.
Anxiety.
Exhaustion.
It makes your heart rate go up when you're dehydrated.
Right.
Which makes you think you're anxious. You're having an anxiety reaction to something when absolutely you're not.
You are dehydrated.
Yeah. And so water. So the other advice I always give everyone: drink water before putting anything else in your mouth, even if it's drinking something else. Okay. Always drink water. Get it in.
Because a lot of times people don't even know they were hungry or they were thirsty. So when you do that, you can tell. Yes. So tell me, we're going to close here shortly, Dr. Catherine. Okay. With all the types of weight loss programs, I mean, where is the place of surgery? Because there's people that would talk about, Doc, I've tried everything. Dr. Catherine is talking about, I'm just not successful.
Yeah. Well, there's ways. There's chemical surgery, basically kind of chemicals. There are medications that are out there that are healthy for weight loss. There are some that you can only take for short bits of time, like Adipex or
Right.
phentermine. There are others that do dual things, like you have bupropion, which is an antidepressant, and it helps suppress appetite and helps with weight loss. You have medications that are for migraine headaches that also, affect weight loss. So as a doctor, sometimes if you're looking at a patient, they have multiple things that you need to take care of. Try to find a medication that does kills two birds with
Yeah,
one stone.
I do that a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But now what's happening is a lot of diabetic medications like Victoza have now become Saxenda for weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
You have Ozempic, which is now the new one, Wegovy, I think is called.
Yeah, once a week. Yeah.
Um, yeah, once a week. And those medications are designed so that you can keep taking them and they help with weight loss. But what I recommend is if whatever you start as a medication, just know that if you stop it, that weight will come back. So what you do is you start building other ways to take over. Muscle is the best medicine to take over from anything else. It's our muscle mass in our muscle toning is such a good way to just get overall health, and it will help you get you to a place where even if you can't come off your medications, you can reduce them drastically. But surgery is a viable option,
Of course.
especially if the psychosocial component of the weight gain and the weight maintenance, or the way the weight was brought on and then held on to, is addressed. If you have surgery and those things are not addressed, often that weight just comes back.
Mm-hmm.
But especially if the weight or the fat is affecting your health, whatever you have to do to get it off in a healthy way, I recommend. So, surgery is a viable option for those who have reached the end of their rope and their health is being affected to the point where they're starting so far behind that it's hard for them to catch up to where they need to be to do it on their own.
Absolutely. Yes, I love to
Mhm.
add that part because sometimes it brings a lot of anxiety. I've
Mhm.
had people on the list already, sent
Mhm.
already to bariatric clinic, and they're like, Doc, I just
Mhm.
decided, no, I don't want it. There's a lot of
Mhm.
stigma too. Let's talk about the stigma that
Mhm.
comes with it, even with the families. Can we stop the stigma around people who are
Mhm.
struggling with weight?
Mhm.
Culturally, I'm from South Africa. Do you know that when you are pregnant in my culture, automatically our elders think, hey, you're eating for two. You need to eat,
Yeah.
eat,
Eat.
eat. There's that.
Yeah.
There's that component of culture that comes with this.
Mhm.
And also, even the way when we come across people, you say, hey, you've lost weight or you are fat. And I think that language, can you talk
Mhm.
about that, Dr. Catherine? Because it has been
Okay.
damaging a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's
Someone has not
interesting
seen you
because
for 20 years and they start
I'm
talking about
okay,
your weight,
but you have to understand, I'm also 55 years old. So I come from
right?
a time, and I also grew up in Kenya. So I came from a time where people would say, "Oh, you're fat," and it was a compliment. So
Right.
there's a difference. There's a big difference. That's changing
Yeah,
now.
not today.
However, yeah, like Bwana Mkubwa, a big man. The bigger you are, the more powerful you are. So,
Yeah,
being overweight was not a bad thing necessarily, especially in places where droughts and starvation were common. So
right.
having a little extra weight was actually a sign of wealth. And
Yes.
so that wasn't
Even in
always the
South Africa
case.
with men who
Yeah.
have that bubble. And I'm like, no, this person has a higher risk of low testosterone and erectile dysfunction. We cannot
Yes.
complement this.
No.
Yes.
However, what is very important in the psychosocial part, toxicity. You have to look around you and see who's around you and who is adding stress to your life and
Right.
learning ways to sort of deflect that.
Yes.
So a lot of time people project their own insecurities onto you. It's usually your best friend who hasn't been able to lose weight who will try to sabotage you when you do. And it may not be intentional. It's just that they don't realize what they're doing, but
Mhm.
it's bringing up a lot of their own insecurities, and so they fight against you in order to do those things. And it's really important to recognize that, which is why in my program I talk about sabotage a lot because it's the people around you. For some of us, it's not liking attention. I have always been muscular. It's actually been very easy for me relatively to lose weight, but I don't like the attention I get. And so
Mm,
I would just I would hold on to it. It was a security blanket. I was
mm.
married, I had children. I'm like, I don't need people looking at me and saying things and whatever, so I'll just hold on to this weight until I had to lose it.
Let's hold
It
on
was,
to that.
yeah.
Talk of the marriage and the relationships and the pressure even spouses have on each other or partners.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that? Because we see this all the time. I mean, I've
Mhm.
seen people coming to my practice saying, my spouse, my husband, my wife makes me feel
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And actually, this
Mhm.
affects even intimacy between
Yeah.
people.
Mhm. It does.
Right?
And so why
Yes.
that's why it has to be addressed and has to be addressed as a family. And so
Mm,
one of the things that has to happen is you do things in a way so that it's seamless,
right.
so that people don't notice. I've had clients tell me my husband's nervous because every time I start a new program, he says I turn into a dragon and I make him eat these things and I make him do these things and then he gets upset.
Right.
And so I was like, well, if he even notices that you're starting this, then we're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so she came back a month later and she said, my husband asked me when I was going to start my program. And she said, I've been on it now for a month. And he didn't notice. I said, that's the point. His life should not be
Yes.
disrupted and it should be enhanced by what you're doing so that he's
Mm-hmm.
getting healthier in the process of you getting healthier and he doesn't even notice. And so that is important. But it's also important to manage someone's expectations. Often I get people, the reason I talk about health, wellness, and weight loss in that order is because people come to me for weight loss thinking that losing weight is going to fix everything, that it's going to fix their relationship. It's going to stop, their spouse from, cheating. It's going to stop them from being abusive, emotionally abusive, or physically abusive. It's going to somehow make them more money, or it's going to
Mm-hmm.
improve their job from a toxic boss who, has their own issues. And so it's really important to manage expectations, say this is important for it to do, but if these things don't change, don't give up your health journey. Don't give up
Yes.
your wellness journey. Just
Yes.
recognize that some of the things you need to fix. And this is what I often say, sometimes the weight you have to lose is not your own. It's on
Mm-hmm.
somebody else.
Love it. You know what, Dr. Catherine, you summarized it. And honestly, it's just that
Hmm.
awareness around us. Who
Hmm.
do you keep around you? Who do you allow? Because sometimes we just
Hmm.
allow people to say whatever to us. So
Yeah.
it's important for us to guard that mental health space. Dr.
Yeah.
Catherine, I loved this conversation. Do you want to leave my people
Right.
here with few words and how to get in touch with you? I mean, they can see it
Okay.
on the page here. We have you here.
Hmm.
I have your website. And as we
Hmm.
close, well, I'd like you to say something to them.
Okay. Well, you can find me on YouTube, Health, Wellness, and Weight Loss Centers, Instagram, Health, Wellness Centers, on Facebook, Catherine Harmon Toomer, MD, and MD, CHToomerMD.com. I'm pretty much a lot of different places under different names so that, anyone can find me based on what they're looking for. But just know that the journey to good health and wellness and weight loss is the destination. Focus on the process, enjoy the process, trust the process. If don't focus on the end, because everybody's end is different.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine. To our
Okay.
viewers, they're still here watching with us. Thank you for staying with us. And again, just to amplify to what Dr. Catherine was saying, you have your own journey. And
Mm-hmm.
the notion of comparison, we need to read ourselves from that because truly,
Yes.
you are not made like your sister or your brother. You are on
Mm-hmm.
your own journey. Just focus on that
Yes.
and cultivate
Yes.
those healthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
The people around you, it's very important to have those winners, around you. It's
Yes.
very important. And again,
Yes.
thank you so much for staying with us. Next week, we're going to come here, same time, same place, same time. Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much, Dr. Catherine. I really
Bye.
enjoyed this. And of course, I'm hoping
So did I.
come back and talk more about this because this is something we can't overemphasize and talk more
Mm-hmm.
about.
I
It's
agree.
something that is a
I
daily
agree.
thing. It's our daily living, right?
I agree. I agree.
Thank you so much for your
Well,
time.
thank you for having me. I really
Loved
enjoyed this.
it.